Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping right into a pretty epic journey back in time to explore the literal roots of globalization. Long before our modern shipping lanes existed, the southern coast of India, specifically the Coromandel Coast, was the beating epicenter of this massive intercontinental trade network.
Okay, just think about this for a second. Can you actually imagine an ancient empire with a navy so incredibly powerful that it essentially turned a massive ocean into its own private lake? I mean, it sounds like pure fantasy, right? But as we're going to see, this was the absolute reality for the masters of the Coromandel Coast.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. 1. Kings of the Coromandel Coast. 2. Pallavas, pioneering the waves. 3. Cholas, masters the ocean. 4. Bustling ports of the south. And 5. Pearls, spices, and war horses.
All right, starting with Section 1, Kings of the Coromandel Coast, setting the stage. To give you a quick sense of how the power shifted, we're starting way back in the 4th century AD when the Pallavas first emerge. They hit their absolute peak by the 7th century. Then, as they kind of start to fade, the imperial Cholas make this dramatic rise in the 9th century, which all builds up to the 11th century with some truly unprecedented naval expeditions, like the spectacular conquest of Kataram.
Moving on to Section 2, Pallavas, pioneering the waves.
So, the Pallavas were super interesting because they used the ocean for some really sophisticated geopolitics. Get this. King Narasimhavan I actually dispatched naval expeditions just to help out his friend, the Sri Lankan prince Manavarma. And later on, they even sent aid to a Chinese king to help fight off Arab and Tibetan forces. No way, right? Through these massive maritime connections, they ended up deeply influencing places like Siam, Malaya, Kamboja, Srivijaya, and Angkor. They basically became the torchbearers of Hindu culture across Southeast Asia.
They say, if you want to know what a society truly values, just look at their money. And early copper coins from the 3rd and 4th centuries are a perfect example. They feature a standing humped bull on one side, but crucially, a 2-masted ship on the reverse. So maritime mastery wasn't just some side project for them, it was literally stamped right onto their cash.
All right, Section 3, Cholas, masters the ocean. Now, here's where things shift. While the Pallavas were all about diplomacy and cultural alliances, the Cholas, well, they relied purely on hard power. They took a well-equipped navy and transformed it into this devastating tool for military conquest. They were out there actively hunting down and destroying rival fleets, like the Cheras, just to establish absolute, unquestioned overseas dominance.
To really wrap your head around the sheer scale of their ambition, just look at this number, 12,000. Under King Rajaraja I, the Chola Navy pulled off a massive, coordinated conquest of 12,000 islands, which is what we know today as the Maldives. It's just a spectacular display of open ocean logistics.
And because they completely controlled the Coromandel Coast, the Malabar Coast, Ceylon, the Maldives, and Kataram, historians actually have a pretty famous name for this era. They say the Bay of Bengal became a Chola Lake. They quite literally controlled the entire maritime highway stretching from China all the way to the Mediterranean.
But look, this wasn't just flexing military muscle for the fun of it. It brought unimaginable wealth back home. All those trade revenues funded some truly monumental architecture. They imported Saiva Brahmins, established breathtaking new capitals like Gangaikonda Cholapuram, and they built these countless, awe-inspiring stone temples that still dominate the skyline today. They're basically towering testaments to their maritime riches.
Which brings us to Section 4, Bustling ports of the south.
These coastlines were perfectly positioned right midway between the east and west. Just picture the docks at Mahabalipuram and Nagapattinam. They were absolutely teeming with merchants trading directly with China. If you head further south, you hit Korkai, which was famous specifically for its really dangerous pearl diving. Then you had this constant, chaotic import-export scene at Salior and Villanum, not to mention the great Chola Emporium of Puhar, right at the river mouth, which was organized into these wildly bustling, distinct districts.
And keep in mind, we're not talking about a few simple wooden docks for loading cargo here. These were incredibly wealthy, cosmopolitan urban centers. Trade guilds were managing the markets using heavy gold coins, and foreign ships arriving from all over the world were actually granted state protection in exchange for paying some pretty lucrative tolls.
And finally, Section 5, Pearls, Spices, and War Horses.
The Tamil lands were, quite frankly, completely blessed by nature. They exported these highly demanded luxury items. We're talking pearls, ivory, coral,
famous spices like pepper and cardamom, and finely woven cotton textiles. In return, they're bringing in exotic goods from Sumatra, Java, and Persia. But you know, the most crucial import of all actually came from Arabia.
Here's the thing. In medieval warfare, cavalry was absolutely everything. But the climate in southern India just wasn't suited for breeding top-tier mounts. So Arabian war horses became a matter of strict national security. International trade wasn't just about getting rich for these guys, it was the absolute lifeline for maintaining the military power they needed to hold their empire together.
So we've seen how the Pallavas pioneered those early diplomatic connections, and how the Cholas came in and forged this unparalleled naval empire, which really leaves us with this final thought. How did these ancient architects of the ocean, trading in pearls and war horses, lay the exact groundwork for the globally connected supply chains that we completely rely on today? The roots of our modern world run incredibly deep into the waters of the Coromandel Coast. Thanks so much for exploring it with me.